Let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10 to 5. A touchdown with Virginia. He did it.
He did it. That's with White. Beavers and he's gone. Touchdown. Tavon Austin.
As the hills of West Virginia resound with the sounds of Golden Blue football.
They want to have a 7-on-7 drill. We want to make it a fist fight. Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football.
From the heart. Streaming. It's Mountaineer pride.
Once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer.
Leave no doubt tonight. No doubt. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue.
West Virginia is a special place. People of the state that have great pride in this WV logo.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
And now it's the show brought to you by Mountaineer fans for Mountaineer fans, the Country Roads webcast. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into Season 6, Episode 172 of the CRW podcast here for our Houston review and reaction episode. And I know this is a game you guys are probably dying to just get out of the way and put in the books and, put a bow on and put this one behind us and move on to the next one. And trust me, so are we here at the Country Roads webcast. But I'll try and be as brief as possible. And because of that, I'm going to do it a little bit differently as well. I know usually we'll talk about the game for a little bit, try and break down, the biggest plays in the game and then get in on the numbers before we hit our Around the Big 12 segment. We'll still take a look at the stats here in a minute. But like I said, I'm going to start with some concerns I had coming out from the game. Then we'll get into some positives. Then we'll take a look at the numbers. So let's start it off with some concerns I have following the 41-39 loss to the Houston Cougars that dropped West Virginia to 4-2 overall on the season and 2-1 in Big 12 conference play. All right, leading off the causes for concern here coming out of this game. I think top of the list after you see the performance in that game for West Virginia, it was something we talked about going into and that we were kind of worried about a little bit, and that's injuries. Injuries have to be the number one cause for concern right now. West Virginia has, been bit by the injury bug since before the season even started, losing Josiah Trotter, who was going to be a big true freshman contributor for them at the linebacker position, losing him to a season-ending injury before the season even started. And then, of course, we get into the season, we lose both Montre Miller at the cornerback position and Keyshawn Cobb at the safety position, two transfers in that I think would have played a big part in this defense this season. You lose both of those guys for the season. And then, of course, come to TCU and that hard-fought victory West Virginia had, but they paid a price in earning that victory. As we know, losing Trey Lathan for the season. We knew the scary situation with Aubrey Burks. Looks like he's going to be back before too long, hopefully, but we didn't have him for this Houston game. That made a difference. And then, of course, on the offensive side, missing the entire left side of your offensive line, Wyatt Milam and Thomas Remick made a difference in the game as well. West Virginia's run game certainly struggled a bit. So I think a cause for concern for West Virginia, and I'm not using it as a complaint for this loss to Houston. You still got to battle through those things and have a next man up mentality. What I'm saying here is this is a cause for concern moving forward, not only because of depth purposes, especially on the defensive side when you look at how thin you're getting there in the secondary, but I think as well as performance-wise on the defensive side. This is the first game we've seen West Virginia without Trey Lathan, and you didn't have Aubrey Burks on the back end. Now, fingers crossed, Aubrey Burks able to return soon, and that could really maybe help shore up your back end, that secondary a little bit, because I think he's a leader on the team as well, and that makes a difference having him out there, not only with his great play, being the talented player that he is that makes a ton of plays in that secondary, but leadership's a factor as well. But speaking of the injuries coming out of this game, I think it's a cause for concern because when you look at this game, not that Ben Cutter played bad, I thought that he played very well, especially to be a true freshman out there. But I think when you look at West Virginia, the things they were doing good on defense early, they were doing a good job with pass rush, and they were doing a good job, in pass coverage for the most part as well. Well, the one linebacker that you had that was probably your best in both of those areas was Trey Lathan. Trey Lathan was doing a great job in quarterback hurries this season, ranking near the top of the conference. And also, he's a very athletic, linebacker that was a former wide receiver, so did a pretty good job in pass coverage. So despite the fact that Ben Cutter was very strong strong playing inside the box, especially coming downhill, going against run plays. I think you lose a little bit when you miss Lathan, especially how it was in terms with this matchup with Houston, who's a team that, likes to pass the football more. You could have used Lathan both for his pass rush, which I think lack of pass rush is one reason the defense struggled in this football game. And then also, be able to cover some of those receivers that our linebackers ended up getting matched up with at times in this game, something West Virginia was trying to avoid, but really couldn't avoid too much because Lee Koba as well, for everything that he does great, I think we all know that his biggest weakness is probably pass coverage as well. So, that worried me going into this game, and unfortunately, that bit us a little bit, as did having Marcus Floyd play in the free safety position. And, this is not a knock on Marcus Floyd personally. He's made some big plays for the Mountaineers this season, especially, a couple games ago when he was playing that nickel spot and able to rush the passer there. I believe that was against Texas Tech when he made those big plays. But this game, we knew he would be playing more of a coverage role, filling in for Aubrey Burks. And while he can do that, we also saw last season when he was the starter at the cat safety position for West Virginia, that was an area where he struggled at times, was adjusting and playing pass coverage as a safety, because we got to remember Marcus Floyd played the cornerback position at Murray State. So I think that they were able to scheme up some things to attack him when they knew Aubrey Burks wasn't there. And then also his cohort, Anthony Wilson, West Virginia's cat safety this season, very good football player, done some great things for the Mountaineers, but also his biggest weakness as well is probably pass coverage. So West Virginia, matched up with Houston, really was not a good matchup for this defense, and that's maybe why you saw some of the struggles that you did. And I think the injuries played a part in that, especially with Trey Lathan and Burks. Trey Lathan, I mentioned, was a big part of the pass rush as well, because West Virginia could, rush 3 and then send him, and that would generate a pass rush, or 4 and send him. And in this game, it seemed like if they wanted to get any pressure on Donovan Smith, they were going to have to bring, 5 or maybe even 6. And they really couldn't afford to do that because of the talented Houston receivers. So it really put West Virginia into a bit of a catch-22. So I'm not using injuries as an excuse for this game, but when we're talking about concerns moving forward, which is what I'm trying to do here with this episode, talk about concerns and then some positives. And one of my main concerns moving forward now has to be injuries. I think, flip it over to the offensive side. You saw the run game struggle probably more than it has all season. And I think that left side of the offensive line, West Virginia missing, left tackle Wyatt Milam and left guard Thomas Remick, has to, play a factor in that, especially when you've been looking at West Virginia's stats this season. A lot of their successful runs have been on that stretch outside zone play with Wyatt Milam setting the edge on that left side. And you saw West Virginia counter that in this game, run a lot to the right side, try and go around Doug Nestor on that right tackle. And not to say they didn't trust Nick Malone. Nick Malone played well on that left side, and West Virginia's pass blocking was phenomenal. We'll talk more about that when I talk about positives. But the run game struggled a little bit, and you got to think some of that was due to the injuries that have taken place that unfortunately had West Virginia without that entire left side of their offensive line. Like I said, not making an excuse. West Virginia still had plenty of opportunities to win this game. I think those players stepped up and played well, but also it's a thing with chemistry. West Virginia had a lot of chemistry in the run game with the pieces that they had involved. So, that plays a part as well. So I think you got to hope that looking forward, injuries are a concern there as well, because you need to get Wyatt Milam back. You need to get Remick back on that left side potentially to help your run game moving forward, because you can't have your run game struggle like it did in this one, which is my last little piece I wanted to talk about here in the concerns, was just West Virginia kind of reverting back on some things that they had really improved on early in the season. And that was a big reason that they were winning. And those to me were, discipline and just playing smart football is what I would like to, refer to it as, being a team that doesn't beat themselves. And West Virginia had done a good job doing that this season by, not committing a lot of penalties, just not doing, I guess, bonehead things you could call them that would really cost you in a football game. And West Virginia in this game didn't do that. Prior to this contest, the most penalties West Virginia had picked up in a game was 5, and that was way back in the first game of the season against Penn State. So West Virginia had under 5 penalties in every football game along their 4-game winning streak. But then you see in this game, West Virginia is penalized 8 times, and of course the most costly one there at the end on Garrett Green, potentially that celebration penalty. But there were multiple penalties that were costly for West Virginia in this game. And I think, being the team that West Virginia has been, winning the way that they have, it leaves West Virginia with a very small margin of error. West Virginia has to be the team that they were during that 4-game winning streak to continue to win these football games. So West Virginia can't, have a game where they just aren't focused and let things slip and commit stupid penalties and turn the ball over and things that they did in this game against Houston, or it's going to continue to bite them moving along throughout the season, because West Virginia was winning, doing the little things right. And you see when you make some big plays in this game, which is something we were hoping to see West Virginia do and get some explosiveness to them. It seems like then they let the little things go by the wayside, and you can't do that. You got to have both of those in conjunction moving forward if you're West Virginia, or at minimum, get back to doing the little things right because you were finding ways to win when you were doing that. So cause for concern moving forward, got to be more disciplined, get those penalties back the way you had them. And then also we know West Virginia was winning, tackling and blocking. Those are kind of the fundamentals they were using. I said it was a team that doesn't beat themselves. Tackling was an issue with West Virginia's team last year. This year had really been a strength of this team, being very sure tacklers out there on the football field. Solid on the defensive side we had seen throughout this season as well. And then in this game, unfortunately, you see some of the things West Virginia was doing. I mentioned the discipline. Also, we're talking, defense, run game, blocking and tackling, those fundamentals West Virginia had been using during the 4-game winning streak. Those unfortunately went by the wayside in this game as well, as West Virginia in this game comes away with their lowest run grade of the season as a team, their lowest run blocking grade on the season as a team, their lowest defensive grade by far on the season as a team, their lowest run defense grade on the season by far as a team, and their lowest tackling grade on the season by far, tackling all the way down at a 48.6. So there you see the proof in the pudding. The missed tackles really hurting West Virginia in this football game. So obviously the things that you were utilizing as a strength early in the season, you need to get back to those and doing those right. Get back to your sure tackling, get back to, blocking well, get back to playing good defense and running the football well. And West Virginia, I think, can do that moving forward, and they're going to need to do that, and hopefully we'll see these grades return to form in the future, which brings me to my final concern here, and that's special teams play. I think it goes right along with the things I'd said earlier. West Virginia had done a good job in special teams. Look no further than the win over TCU, making multiple good plays in special teams, not just the 2 field goal blocks, which obviously stand out, but they had been good in coverage and in the return game this season. And then here against Houston, we obviously know the kick return, it's early in the game by Matthew Golden, really hurt West Virginia, but also Houston ran a punt return back for a touchdown that was called back due to a penalty. And West Virginia just was outplayed on special teams in this game overall, and that reflected as well West Virginia's lowest special teams grade on the season by far, all the way down to 44.8 according to PFF. So West Virginia has to get back to playing good special teams moving forward. So hopefully what you have to hope if you're a Mountaineer fan is West Virginia has some of these things on film. They have these grades as well. They can diagnose these things and say, look, these are the things we were doing good. Look how far we dropped in this game. And they can really hone in on it this week and correct it as they get ready to come back home and face a very talented Oklahoma State team and what is now a very pivotal game in the Big 12 race moving forward. But there were some positives that came out of this that I think West Virginia can look forward to help them in that game. So let's flip over to the other side of the coin now. We got the negative stuff out of the way. I won't dwell too much longer on this game. Like I said, I did give some immediate thoughts following the game. I'm sure if you didn't check out our post-game reaction show on the West Virginia Voice of College Football channel or Big 12 Voice of College Football channel, check that out as well. And I also did appearances both on Couz's Corner and Mountaineer Paul Talks Football on YouTube. If you didn't get a chance to check that out on their shows, I gave some more in-depth thoughts on this game. But I know you guys are tired of hearing about all the plays, the Hail Mary and all that, so didn't want to dive in on that. But there's some concerns I had coming out of it. Now let's flip it over. Let's talk about some positives I had coming out of the game. All right, positives for West Virginia coming out of the game. I think obviously lead it off with the passing offense, right? That's what we had been waiting to come along for West Virginia. We knew there was going to come a time when someone was going to stack the box and West Virginia wouldn't be able to run the football. I don't think we really expected it to be in this game against Houston, but however, lucky for us, the coaching staff, it appeared, had game plan for just that occasion in this game. You heard Neil Brown, if you listen to the pregame radio conversation with Tony Caridi, say that they were going to open things up and thought that Garrett Green would put on a performance that would really go to show, all the great things that they've been raving about him throughout this offseason that we hadn't really got a chance to see yet as Mountaineer fans. And all in all, despite, how it was kind of clouded by the final penalty that unfortunately he received that led to the short field for Houston, which ultimately led to the end that we got. I know a lot of people have been harping on that, but let's talk about the positive side for Garrett Green, because without his performance, West Virginia isn't in this game. He has an amazing clutch drive there at the end to get the touchdown to put West Virginia ahead with 12 seconds to go. And West Virginia opened up the offense for him, and I think it paid dividends. We wondered when not only the passing game would take off, but when the play action passing game would take off. And West Virginia, ran the football in the first half despite not having success, and it really set them up for some big-time plays on play-action passes in the second half, and Garrett Green did a phenomenal job cashing in on those. His deep ball grade was phenomenal. His deep ball grade over the middle was even better, 96.7 on his deep ball grade over the middle. That's throws over 20 yards in between the numbers. He was 5 of 6, 210 yards on those throws, so great job there for him, and I think seeing his performance and how the passing game evolved can only give you great hope for the future of this season, because that's the one thing we had talked about during West Virginia's 4-game winning streak was, okay, the running game has been great, but what about the passing game? If West Virginia can find a way to get that going, then they will be able to, really be, I don't want to say unstoppable, but they'll be very, very hard to game plan against for opposing defenses moving forward on the season. And now I think opposing defenses are going to watch that game tape of the West Virginia offense against this Houston defense and say, oh man, they're not just going to grind it out on us. They can spread it out and air it out too. We got to worry about that. We can't just load the box and send our safety screaming downhill, because they got guys that can make plays. You've seen Devin Carter do it. You've seen Hudson Clement do it. You've seen E.J. Horton do it. Traylon Ray on the flea flicker, which was well designed. So I thought that was awesome. So wanted to give a big positive shout out to Garrett Green, 391 passing yards after he only had 544 on the season coming into this game. The most passing yards a West Virginia quarterback has had individually since 2018. He accounts for 4 touchdowns, only throws the 1 interception. Should have been 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. You guys know that 1 interception was actually a touchdown in Jalen Anderson's arms on that wheel route. So shout out to Garrett Green in the passing game. That's a positive coming out of this one. And then another positive I have to touch on, of course, and I think is going to help West Virginia moving forward on the season if it can continue, and that's explosive plays, because that's the one area we've been looking at. It's been the passing game and it's been lack of explosion on offense. Those are the 2 things we've been looking to see more of in this game. And I'd say that West Virginia in the second half of this football game probably, I don't have the number on this, but probably nearly had as many explosive plays in that second half that they have had up to the entire season at this point, especially if you take out that game against Duquesne. I would say that it was probably even greater amount of explosive plays in the second half of the Houston game than had been in the prior, 5 games ahead before that for West Virginia. So explosion came on in this game. Is that because the Houston defense is bad? Yeah, maybe. But you also got to take into account that even if it is because the Houston defense is bad, it's still going to build confidence for these players on the West Virginia offense that, hey, we can do this against, teams in our own conference. Our offense hasn't been, clicking, but we're just now, hitting our stride and moving forward. We can really make some big plays. So is the Houston defense bad? Yes. Does that mean the West Virginia offense can't do this moving forward? No. I think moving along, you will see the West Virginia offense have better performances in yardage and probably in scoring than what we saw in the first 5 games. We just got to hope that the West Virginia defense, reverts back to its earlier form and West Virginia gets both those in sync during the same game, because if they can do that, then it can really be a tough team to beat in this Big 12 conference, because we know West Virginia was playing great defense, and I'd say in this game they played great offense. Which brings me to my next positive, and that's play calling. I think, a lot of people are mad at Neil Brown following this loss, and I get it. You wanted to be 5-1. We should have been 5-1. I'm not going to argue with you there. But I don't think you can argue against the fact that the offense played awesome in this game. The plays were well designed. They were well called. They were, the timing at which they were called was ideal in most situations. Even the times that West Virginia struggled, I think a lot of the play calling was there. You look at 1 3-and-out West Virginia had on a crucial drive. There was a deep over to Devin Carter that was open. It was missed. A 3rd down swing pass to, C.J. Donaldson on the wheel route that West Virginia utilized for those running backs a lot this season, wide open, and they missed that one. Going along with that, with the play calling and the game planning, I love West Virginia getting those running backs involved in the passing game. I know obviously it turned into an interception one time, but the play was open and the plays were well designed. So all in all, I think for me personally, what I would say is this is, if not the best, it's, top 3, top 5 best games Neil Brown has called in his time at West Virginia as a play caller. Shout out to him for that. And then the final positive, I just want to bring it around, one more piece of optimism before we'll pull up the numbers here and we'll react to the stats from this game. And then we'll take a look at the rest of the Big 12 conference action and recap that before we close up here on episode 172. Won't keep you guys too long here. We'll put a bow on this Houston thing and look forward to the future of West Virginia football, because I think it can be a successful season, which brings me to my final point of optimism. I know this is a tough loss to swallow. We should have won it there in the final seconds. But if you're a Mountaineer fan, we need to rally behind this team and let them know that we still have faith in them, that they can be good, because they really can. This Big 12 conference is wide open, starting with this upcoming game against Oklahoma State, where we now have identical overall records, identical conference records. So it effectively sets up as a battle to stay in the conference race, and we need West Virginia to be able to do that, and they're going to need our support there, not only at Mountaineer Field, wherever you are. Just try and remain positive about this team, because I think of it this way. You have 2 losses on the season. You're 4-2 at this point. I think a lot of people would have taken that if you told them that heading into the year. And also, both of your losses, one of them is to one of the best teams in the country in Penn State on the road to open the season. The other is against Houston, with a couple of freak plays thrown in there, one being a should-have-been touchdown for you that turned into an interception, the other, of course, being the Hail Mary that ended the game. And you lost that game with multiple injuries across the board for West Virginia, at least 4 starters out in this game. And as I previously stated, I'm not saying that to make an excuse for West Virginia as the reason that they lost. I'm saying it for a reason for optimism for Mountaineer fans. You have 2 losses on the season. One of them is a game that you expected to lose. It's a really good Penn State team. The other one is a team you should have beaten in Houston, yes, but you had multiple injuries and you still almost won the game, save for a couple freak plays. So just trying to give you a glass half full kind of perspective there on what could lie ahead for West Virginia in these final 6 games. I think it's a really good football team that we've got on our hands here in Mountaineer Nation. We've saw the defense perform well early in the season. Now we're seeing the offense come into their own. And like I said, if they can get those synced up within the same game, get some of these players to return back from injury, I think we've got a bright future ahead for this West Virginia football club in 2023. So let's try and focus on that moving forward rather than the, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching defeat that we suffered in this game against Houston. Let's put a bow on that. Let's hope for a positive end of the season, because West Virginia has 6 games left. And guess what? As it sits right now, they've got a chance to compete for a Big 12 conference title. So until that's not the case, that's something that we can continue to write home about, right? Is West Virginia, battling, being in the Big 12 race, and they can still continue to do that coming up with this game against Oklahoma State. So that's the final point of positivity I wanted to leave off on. Now I'm going to pull up the stats. We'll react to them both team-wise and individual-wise before we finally put a bow on this game against Houston, and then look around at some other games that occurred within the Big 12 conference this week before we close up shop here on episode 172 of the CRW podcast. All right, Mountaineer Nation, going to lead off here with the team statistics, but before I get into this, just wanted to take a second to remind you guys, if you're tuned in on the video side, whether it's on the Country Roads webcast channel or on the web there at WVSportsNow.com, where you find all kinds of great Mountaineer sports content, and we're really appreciative of being a part of the Sports Now family of networks. But whether you're tuned in watching this episode there or on our YouTube channel, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like on the video. It really helps its performance and future videos performances as well. If you're a West Virginia fan, Big 12 fan, college football fan, be sure subscribe here. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. We appreciate you tuning in that way, and we appreciate you tuning in if you listen on the audio side, which you can find on any podcast platform you like: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. You can find us there. Just search Country Roads Webcast. We appreciate you listening there. You can leave us a rating review. That helps. And be sure to share us around with other Mountaineer fans you may know. But just wanted to take a second out to say we appreciate you for tuning in this episode, whether you're a viewer or a listener here to episode 172 of the CRW podcast here. But with no further ado, let's take a look at the team stats here, as West Virginia unfortunately falls to Houston 41-39 in the game's closing seconds there as time expires. West Virginia, though, picked up 26 first downs in the game. There you go. Another thing that just shows how explosive this West Virginia offense was in this football game. Houston did pick up 20, though. 13 of 19 for third down efficiency for West Virginia. That's another positive I should have hinted on when I was talking positives, is West Virginia had really struggled in third down offense this season. That changed in this football game. Hopefully that remains the norm moving forward. 3 of 9 for Houston on third down. The Mountaineers were 1 of 1 on fourth down. Houston, no fourth down attempts. Total yardage, West Virginia, 546 yards of total offense. Awesome offensive performance for the Mountaineers in this game, as I feel like I've really, drove home, and I'm going to continue to try and do so here as I talk about these numbers. Whereas the Houston only gained 393 yards. However, They didn't have the ball a ton. West Virginia dominated time of possession, just see here momentarily. And Houston, as I mentioned earlier, made a lot of plays on special teams, including a kick return touchdown, which, cost them a drive. So they didn't play that many snaps on offense, but did gain 393 yards. Passing, West Virginia outgaining Houston 391 to 253. Wouldn't have guessed that coming into the game, that the West Virginia offense we'd seen throughout the season would outgain a Dana Holgorsen offense in passing yards, but they do. 391 yards for Garrett Green, 253 for Houston. Of course, West Virginia did get the one interception that I talked about previously. No interceptions, no turnovers at all for Houston, losing the turnover battle, unfortunately, for the Mountaineers 1-0, something that cost them in this game as well. And then rushing wise, West Virginia did outgain Houston on the ground, 155 to 140. However, Houston did not run the ball nearly as much, so they actually averaged 5 yards per carry compared to West Virginia only at 3.5. Like I said, the Houston defense did a great job stuffing the West Virginia run game more often than not in this game, probably more so than any other team I've seen in this season. West Virginia's played Power 5 wise. Penalties, like I said, West Virginia really had the unfortunate timing of penalties coming back to bite them after it had been such a strength for them earlier in the season. 8 for 84 for the Mountaineers, 7 for 70 for Houston. And as I stated a little bit earlier, time of possession, the Mountaineers winning that battle, 37 minutes to 23 for Houston. So absolute dominating in time of possession. Let's take a look at the individual stats, and then we'll finally move on from this heartbreaker, and won't talk about it too much more. Get ready to wrap up this episode with talking about some Big 12 games. But individual numbers, I talked about Garrett Green, 391 yards, 2 touchdowns passing, also added 47 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Great performance from the Mountaineer quarterback that has certainly solidified his job now and hopefully has earned the respect of Mountaineer Nation as well moving forward. And hopefully this is only the beginning for what could be a really great season for the West Virginia quarterback. CJ Donaldson did play better in this game than he had recently. Now, I know a lot of people have been harping on him. Still, there were moments, as I said, the West Virginia run game struggled, but 17 carries, 66 yards, and did find the end zone. Jaheim White, who continues to get more carries on this offense, 7 carries, 23 yards. Saw Rodney Gallagher carry a jet sweep, 2 carries, 11 yards, as did E.J. Horton, took one of those for 4 yards, and then Jalen Anderson, 5 carries, 4 yards, struggled in his minimal action on the night, unfortunately. And then receivers, Devin Carter with his breakout performance of the season, best game since the Penn State game, and even had a better game in this one than he did against Penn State. I believe they targeted him 11 times in this game, hauled in 5 of those, over 100 yards, 5 catches, 116 yards for Devin Carter. Cole Taylor, great performance as well, 5 catches, 62 yards, a couple of hurdles thrown in there. Hudson Clement, 2 catches, 59 yards, 1 touchdown. And of course, that play would have gone down forever in Mountaineer football history. I don't think it'll be talked about as much now as it should be because he really made an awesome play. And how fitting would it have been, the ending that wasn't the storybook ending that could have been, having a West Virginia kid score the touchdown that beats Dana after, his comments and stuff. But ultimately, there was 12 seconds left to be played. We know how it happened. But nonetheless, that doesn't discount Hudson Clement, the awesome season that he's having, and I hope he continues to get more targets moving forward on the season. E.J. Horton, we finally see him get downfield, make a big play that we've been waiting to see all season. We've known his speed's been there, the plays have been there. They've just missed him a couple of times. This time they connect on his 45-yard reception down the field, which is even more impressive because it came after he had to return to the game following a dislocated pinky when Garrett Green, drilled one in there. We know Garrett Green throws the ball really hard, almost too hard at times. Sometimes he could afford to put a little bit more touch on it. But unfortunately, it dislocated Horton's pinky. They popped that thing back in. A few series later, he comes out, catches a awesome 45-yard pass to start a West Virginia drive. Traylon Ray, 3 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. Probably his best game yet as a Mountaineer as well. Saw some really great things from him. His touchdown, of course, the flea flicker play. Really loved the design of that, the timing of that. It all worked out very well. Traylon Ray did a great job selling his block and then beating the defense up the field and hauling in the over-the-shoulder catch there. And then Preston Fox, 1 catch, 31 yards. And as I said, West Virginia getting the running backs involved a little bit. CJ Donaldson, 2 catches, 25 yards. Jalen Anderson, 1 reception, 10 yards. Nearly had a touchdown as well. Moving over to the defense, and I know it was a bit of a letdown game for the West Virginia defense, but still want to highlight some of these statistical numbers. Jared Bartlett, I thought, was the one defender that really stood out to me to the naked eye during the game. I thought he was giving considerable effort out there, especially on the 1 sack that he got. He really got in there and made a play. And then he was in there several other times fighting through. I thought one time he was held. They threw a flag. They picked it up. That happened several times throughout this game. But Jared Bartlett, I thought, played well. Ended up leading the Mountaineers in tackles. 7 tackles, 1 sack, 1 TFL. 7 tackles for Malachi Ruffin, 6 for Lee Koba, 5 for Ben Cutter, making his first career start at the Mike linebacker position, 4 tackles and a TFL for Hershey McLaurin, 4 for Marcus Floyd, filling in for Aubrey Burks as the starter at free safety. Cat safety Anthony Wilson also added 4 tackles. 3 tackles, a half a tackle for a loss, and a half a sack for Tyron Bradley. A TFL for Lance Dixon, 2 TFLs for Sean Martin. And lastly, half a tackle for Eddie V. And then if you're, of course, watching on the video side, you can see some of the other numbers as I scroll through there. But if you're on the audio side, those are pretty much the standout ones, in my opinion there. So that will pretty much wrap up the discussion of the numbers here. Wanted to dive in on the stats there. I know, like I said, you guys are probably done with the Houston game. I'm ready to be done with it as well. Let's move on. Hope for better days on the horizon for Mountaineer football. Heartbreaker, suffering that defeat, dropping West Virginia to 4-2 overall, 2-1 in Big 12 conference play, but they're not out of it just yet. Still in good shape in the conference. A lot of games remaining on this schedule, a lot of winnable games remaining on this schedule that West Virginia is going to have a chance to compete in down to the very last second, like they did in this one against Houston. Didn't work out in their favor this time, but you got to think moving forward, it's going to happen for them more often than not. At least that's what I like to believe with my gold and blue glasses on that we like to wear here on the Country Roads webcast. And hopefully you all through Mountaineer Nation can find a pair to put on and make things a little bit more positive for you moving forward on the season. But wrapping up there with that Houston game, West Virginia, unfortunately, fell in week 7 of the college football season, but they weren't the only team, and they weren't the only team within the Big 12 conference to be upset either. Several underdogs came out on top this week within the Big 12, and let's take a look at some of those matchups here as we recap the action from around the Big 12 in our final segment here on episode 172 of the CRW podcast. All right, so following West Virginia's Thursday loss, I know a lot of Mountaineer fans may not have tuned into college football Saturday, and I can't blame you if you didn't do so. I know it took several days for me to finally feel back to normal and not completely heartbroken and crushed as well, but I did, manage to listen to some of these games Saturday while I was working, and a lot of good ones. So let's recap the Saturday action from around the Big 12 conference here, starting off with Iowa State and Cincinnati. Iowa State coming out and really looking good now. They're actually now in second place in the Big 12 conference after this win. I think we were all, kind of riding with Cincinnati on the preview show, but Iowa State goes in and not only wins on the road, and I think Nippert Stadium's a tough place to play. We know that from our Big East days, but they go in and win on the road handedly by 3 scores, 30-10. Iowa State don't look now, but coming into their own a little bit with some young players there, filling in after that gambling scandal. One of those, of course, being Rocco Becht, who we always like to mention here because of the West Virginia connection on the CRW. But Iowa State obviously been, their trademark has been doing it with defense there, John Haycock and those guys, and they get it done on that side as well in this game, and their defense continues to look pretty good. And they're a team that's going to have something to say in this Big 12 race, it looks like, moving forward. 30-10 win over Cincinnati there. And then our next game, which may have been the most surprising result just because the wide margin of victory and because the fact that, Chandler Morris was gone for TCU, people wondered how they'd look with Josh Hoover at quarterback, if they'd be able to bounce back. I felt like they'd win this game. I predicted them to do so on our preview show, but I did not expect them to win it this way. TCU welcomes a Big 12 newcomer BYU in a big way to the conference. 44-11. TCU puts on a show in the rout there at home, gets off the schneid in a major way, and who knows? Maybe it's a thing for TCU. Maybe they should just name a starting quarterback every season, let him start a game or two, and then bring in a backup, and they'll take off. Because look, last season, Chandler Morris was the starter. Unfortunately, goes down for injury. Max Duggan takes over. Magical run ensues. Small sample size to this point, but Chandler Morris goes down with injury. Josh Hoover takes over and looks like a completely different team. So we'll see what happens with TCU the rest of the season. But starting off good with Josh Hoover right now, 44-11. TCU gets back on the winning side of things. The next game, of course, was our game of the week. We'll skip over that one and look on to Kansas State, Texas Tech, where Kansas State comes out on top 38-21 in Lubbock. Also a tough place to play. I thought Texas Tech may come out on top of this one. Kansas State surprised me in multiple ways, not only because it's not Will Howard, who, I mentioned previously, I think last week had been struggling, but instead it's Avery Johnson, the freshman quarterback for the Wildcats. What a performance by Avery Johnson in this game. And I think if you're Kansas State, you might just want to ride with Johnson at this point. I know that would be what I would want if I was a Wildcat fan after seeing his performance, how much better you looked on offense. And I know Will Howard was very special for you last season, but he's really struggled so far this season, and Avery Johnson really provided a spark. 8 of 9 passing, 4 rushing touchdowns, 90 yards rushing. He looks like a playmaker out there. I think he's a guy to watch moving forward in the Big 12 Conference. So look out for Avery Johnson and the Kansas State Wildcats there with the 38-20 win over Texas Tech. As for Texas Tech, Baron Morton goes down. They're down to their third string quarterback. You hate to see that. Hopefully they're able to, scheme some things up, but they've shown in the past that they're able to win, even down the depth chart at quarterback. So I don't think you can count Texas Tech out just yet that they're going to be a team that doesn't have a successful season this year. We'll see what happens. Hopefully Morton's injury is not too bad moving forward as well. You hate to see that after what happened to Tyler Shue, but I think the story from this game is, of course, the emergence of Avery Johnson over at Kansas State, and then Kansas State getting a big road win, 38-21, which then brings us to our final game here in Week 7 in the Big 12 Conference, and it was our game of the week here on the Country Roads webcast and our preview show, and I think it lived up to that billing. In Stillwater, Oklahoma State, West Virginia's upcoming opponent, comes out on top of Kansas State, 39-32. What a game this was. Back and forth pretty much the entire way. I think Oklahoma State's offense has really come to life since they went away from playing multiple quarterbacks, really started focusing on Alan Bowman. Kansas, they haven't had Jalen Daniels, but Jason Bean looked really good in this game for them. They had chances all the way up until the end. Oklahoma State, ends up surviving. Stillwater's a tough place to play, so still tip your cap to Kansas going in there and giving it their all. Unfortunately, they lose as a ranked opponent. Oklahoma State pulls the upset as the underdog, and Oklahoma State is on a roll right now. Exact same record as West Virginia at this point, 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the Big 12 Conference. So as I said, that's just what really has this setting up as a big-time matchup for the Mountaineers this upcoming week. But Oklahoma State, what stood out to me for them in this game, and it's 2 words, and it's the running back on offense, Ollie Gordon. He was doing it all for the Cowboys. 6 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Yes, that's their running back. And to prove it to you, how about the fact that he added 29 carries and 168 yards and another touchdown? So if West Virginia is looking for somebody to focus in on the game plan, I think they found it. But hopefully that doesn't mean they leave some other guys open as well, because there's other playmakers for Oklahoma State. Brendan Presley's really good. He's been there forever. And, a familiar face in Alan Bowman. West Virginia's played him before, had success against him in the past. Hopefully they're able to do so this week. But for now, Oklahoma State's going to be coming into this game riding high, following a big-time win over what was a ranked Kansas Jayhawks club. Oklahoma State may factor into this Big 12 competition after all. I've said it in the past here on the Country Roads webcast, you can never bet against Gundy, and unfortunately everyone was doing that this season, and he's proven why. I believe that to be, a statement that you should never bet against Gundy, because here he is now right here in the thick of the conference race with the Mountaineers on his schedule coming up, and he'll take a trip to Morgantown this week to face our West Virginia Mountaineers, but he's going to be doing it coming off a win over Kansas, and they're going to be pretty confident coming into this game as they win our Big 12 game of the week this week in Week 7, 39-32. Over Kansas, as we wrap up our Around the Big 12 segment this week here on our Houston Review and Reaction episode. So there you have it, Mountaineer Nation. That will pretty much do it here for Season 6, Episode 172 of the CRW podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one, whether you watch the video version, whether you're listening on the audio side, tuned in there at WVSportsNow.com. However you did so, we really appreciate it, and we look forward to talking with you guys here in the near future. Stephen and Brad will most likely be joining me again here in the next couple of days as we'll break down Oklahoma State and provide our preview and predictions for that matchup, as well as other action around the Big 12 this week, and we're looking forward to doing that. So be sure to check that out, and you can find out when that episode will release by following us on social media. As you see on the bottom of the screen there, you can follow us on X at WVU Country Roads, and then just Country Roads Webcast, both on Facebook, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube, where you should subscribe to us if you're a Mountaineer fan, and subscribe to the WV Sports Now channel if you don't already as well, as you can find great Mountaineer sports content there and on the web at WVSportsNow.com. Appreciate you guys tuning in this episode. Be sure to drop your thoughts down in the comments comments below if you are tuned in on the video side, or leave them in the rate and review section if you're on the audio side. We appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, we'll be back later this week to hopefully preview more positive things for West Virginia moving forward as we hope for a successful season still yet in 2023. Despite the fact that we'll be coming off a loss this week, that doesn't mean that we won't get back to our winning ways. It just means that we're due for a win here throughout Mountaineer Nation. Hopefully West Virginia is able to pick that up. Either way, we'll be back to preview it and then talk about it afterwards with you guys throughout Mountaineer Nation, and we appreciate your support here on the Country Roads webcast. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those